Hi, my name's Adrian, and 2 months ago my parents vanished at 2 a.m. without saying a word. No note, no goodbye, just gone. I kept calling, nothing. Then I found my mother's hidden letter, tucked behind a photo frame she knew I'd never throw away. Her words, they didn't just explain things. They shredded everything I thought I knew. Turns out she wasn't warning me. She was protecting me from the woman I shared a bed with, my wife, the one who smiled at Sunday dinner, while secretly forging their will. Now I can't stop wondering, how long was she planning to erase us? And worse, was she doing it alone? Stay with me, because the truth, it didn't just cost me my marriage. It nearly cost me everything. The morning didn't start with shouting or sirens or any sign the world was coming apart. It started with coffee, same as always. I woke up to the familiar hiss of the machine, that mechanical exhale that had become my unofficial alarm clock since my parents moved in. I stayed in bed a moment longer, listening to Rosa's footsteps, soft, slow, deliberate, like she was trying not to wake the floorboards. She always moved that way. Ever since her knees started giving her trouble, she'd taken to walking like the world was made of glass. I made my way to the kitchen. Alara was already there, pouring 2 cups of coffee. She always did that first, before breakfast, before speaking. Her way of establishing control, I guess. 2 sugars in hers, 3 in Rosa's. I watched her hand pause, then add a fourth. Too much. I didn't say anything. Neither did Rosa when Alara handed her the cup. She just smiled, polite, fragile. Her fingers trembled a little as she brought it to her lips. I looked away. That silence used to be comforting. Now it felt loaded, like a room just after someone leaves. We sat around the small kitchen table, morning news playing low in the background. Miguel read the paper, squinting at the print like he was still trying to trust it. I scrolled through emails on my phone. Rosa pretended to sip. "Don't forget your pills, Rosa," Alara said, placing the orange bottle right next to her coffee. I color-coded the schedule again, pink for morning, blue for night. She always said it like she was doing everyone a favor. Rosa smiled again. "Gracias, mija," she said, but her eyes darted to me for a second. Just a second. I nodded, not to agree, just to acknowledge. That evening, after dinner, I found Alara standing in front of the fridge with a sheet of paper and a roll of tape. Her handwriting was neat. Too neat. I leaned over and read, "House guidelines. No phone calls after 8 p.m. Quiet hours begin at 8 p.m. No TV in the living room past 9. All medications to be taken as scheduled." Miguel raised his eyebrows. "What's this?" Alara smiled. "Just some structure. It'll help us all stay on the same page." I saw Rosa look at the list. Her mouth opened slightly like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Miguel looked at me, hoping I'd say something, hoping I'd push back. I didn't. I just whispered, "She means well." I hated how small my voice sounded. Dinner ended without dessert. Rosa had always made arroz con leche on Thursdays. Alara didn't allow sweets after 7 anymore. Said it wasn't good for blood sugar. I retreated to my office, closed the door but didn't lock it. The house felt different, like a hotel I'd been in too long. Everything was tidy, labeled, and stripped of comfort. At around 10, I walked past the living room and saw the porch light on. Rosa stood by the door, looking out into the dark. "I just leave it on," she said softly, "so you'll always find your way back home, mijo." I smiled. "Still doing that, huh?" She chuckled. "Old habits." I didn't know then that would be the last moment that felt real for a while. Later that night, I passed the hallway and heard Alara talking on the phone. Her voice was low but not soft. "They're not bad people," she was saying. They're just old-fashioned, stuck in their ways. I need to help them adjust." There was a pause, then laughter. "No, not like that. I'm not a tyrant." I stood there for a long moment. The hallway was dark. The light from the fridge cast a pale glow through the crack in the kitchen door. It buzzed faintly, like a warning. I didn't move, just listened. My fists clenched, but I said nothing. Because if I did, what then? I turned away, went back to our room, and stared at the ceiling. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Controlled. I glanced toward the window. The porch light was still on, but for the first time, it flickered. And I wondered, that question, when did this house stop feeling like home? Followed me through the next day like an echo I couldn't turn off. It was still with me the following night when I walked past the living room and saw the photo frame on the mantel. At first, I didn't notice anything unusual. It was a familiar picture, taken about 5 years ago at Marco's wedding. My parents were standing on the left, Miguel's arm proudly around my mom's shoulder. Elena and I were next to them, both squinting against the sunlight. It used to be one of my favorites, but something caught my eye. The right edge looked wrong, jagged, uneven. I picked up the frame. My thumb brushed against the glass and I realized why it looked strange. The photo had been trimmed, cleanly, too. My parents, gone. Their half of the image, cut out like someone trying to erase them from a memory. I stared for a long time. I didn't move. Alara walked in, holding a folded laundry basket. She saw me looking and said like it was nothing, "Oh, it just looked too crowded. I thought it framed better this way." She said it like she was commenting on furniture. I looked at her, trying to find any trace of irony or guilt. There was none. She adjusted the basket and left the room, humming. I stood there another full minute. The sound of the clock ticked behind me, loud, precise. That photo used to hang above my parents' couch. Now, half of it was gone, and it sat here in Alara's curated version of our home. That night we had dinner, or more accurately, they did. Alara had set the table for 4. I didn't notice until we were about to sit down that there were only 4 plates. My parents' seats, the ones at the far end, were gone. "They already ate earlier," Alara said before I could ask. "They were hungry. I didn't want to make them wait." Rosa looked down at her lap, her fork turning slowly between her fingers. Miguel tried to speak. "We could have waited, hijo, it's okay." But Alara cut him off gently. "No, you needed to rest, remember?" She said it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We ate in silence, forks scraping plates, the faint hum of the dishwasher running from the last load. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat felt tight, locked. In this house, peace had become a luxury we couldn't afford. After dinner, I cleaned the table. Rosa stood by the counter, drying her hands. When Alara went upstairs, Rosa quietly placed a small plate into the fridge, a piece of chicken, some rice, and a note written in her delicate handwriting, for tomorrow, in case she forgets. I froze. It hit me. Even now, Rosa was protecting Alara, still trying to keep the peace, to feed the person slowly starving her of dignity. I wanted to tell her not to. I wanted to say it wasn't her job anymore, but I didn't. Because in that moment, I realized I was just as guilty. Later, lying in bed, my mind drifted to a memory I hadn't thought about in years. I must have been 10. I'd torn up a family photo after an argument with Marco. I was mad he'd gotten a new bike, and I didn't. I cut the picture right between us. Mom found the scraps on my desk. She didn't yell, she just taped the photo back together and said, "You don't fix love by cutting out what hurts." Now, decades later, I couldn't stop hearing those words. And standing there earlier, holding that trimmed frame, I knew she was right. You can't fix love by editing it. You just bury it alive. The next morning, Alara hosted a small brunch. Some neighbors came by, polite people, always ready to compliment her lovely home. She'd set the table on the back patio. Pastries, fruit salad, coffee. Perfect. Except for one thing. There weren't enough chairs. Rosa and Miguel stood behind the group, smiling awkwardly. I whispered, "Mom, sit down." "I'll grab—" Before I could finish, Alara laughed lightly. "Oh, they're fine. They like to move around, don't you?" She looked at my parents the way a teacher looks at a student to cue agreement. Rosa nodded, weakly. Miguel chuckled under his breath, that forced laugh older men use when they've learned not to fight small humiliations. The neighbors laughed too. Polite, harmless laughter that somehow made everything worse. My coffee tasted bitter. When everyone left, I offered to drive my parents to the pharmacy. The car ride was quiet, the kind of quiet that fills the spaces between words you're afraid to say. At a stoplight, Miguel finally asked, "Are we in your way, son?" I gripped the steering wheel. The light turned green. I didn't move. "Of course not," I said finally. "Don't think like that." Rosa looked out the window. I could see her faint reflection in the glass. that same calm, forgiving smile she wore even when she was hurt. "Your wife, she means well," she said softly. I nodded, but I didn't believe it. Not anymore. We drove the rest of the way in silence. By the time I got them home, the sun was setting. The house looked darker than usual. I helped them inside, then stood in the living room for a long moment after they went to bed. The porch light, still on, flickering faintly, like it was struggling to hold on. When I finally went upstairs, Alara was in the kitchen, rearranging things in the pantry. She didn't look up when I came in. Without turning, she said softly, almost to herself, "We need to make some changes around here." I froze in the doorway. Her tone wasn't tired. It was decisive. And I knew she didn't mean redecorating. Those words kept circling in my mind all night, even as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan slowly turning above me. We need to make some changes around here. It wasn't about the decor. It wasn't about routines. It was about my parents. And I knew that, but I didn't want to believe it, because believing it meant admitting I had let it get this far. The next morning, Alara was in an oddly cheerful mood. She made toast with fresh jam, offered to bring Rosa a second cup of tea, even asked Miguel how he slept, smiling like someone trying to impress guests on their first visit. My mother looked suspicious. Miguel was polite, as always. While I was tightening the cabinet door in the laundry room, Rosa peeked in and said gently, "Your wife asked me to sign something about insurance. Just routine things," she said, "to make sure we're covered." I grunted, half distracted. "Yeah, Alara handles all that stuff. She's organized." Rosa hesitated. "It was a lot of pages." I kept my eyes on the screwdriver. "I'm sure it's fine, Mommy." She nodded, but she didn't leave right away. Just stood there a little too long before walking back toward the kitchen. I should have asked more. A few days later, while I was at work, Rosa sent me a message. "Just left the bank. All done signing. Alara said it's all set now." I stared at it on my phone for a few seconds. It sounded harmless, efficient, but something about the wording felt off. All set now, like something had been changed. That night at dinner, I brought it up casually. "What were you signing today at the bank?" Alara barely looked up from her salad. "Just some updates, simplified their accounts, safer that way, less for them to worry about." I looked at Rosa, but she didn't meet my eyes. Miguel stirred his soup without speaking. "Okay," I said, though my gut twisted. Later that week, the first crack split wide open. I got home early from work and found a letter addressed to Alara Solano from the bank. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a statement confirming her as a joint account holder on Miguel and Rosa's savings. Her name, listed first. I stood in the hallway, the envelope open in my hand, staring like it was written in another language. When she came in from the garage, wiping her hands on a towel, I held the paper up. "What is this?" She looked at it for a second, then shrugged. "They asked me to help manage things. It's too much for them. You know that." "You never mentioned this," I said. "I didn't think I needed to. It's not like I emptied their accounts. It's joint access, for emergencies." The way she said emergencies felt rehearsed. Rosa and Miguel stepped into the room. I held the letter up to them. "Did you ask Alara to do this?" Rosa looked confused. "She said it was a permission form. To allow her to get statements on our behalf since, with my memory sometimes." Her voice faded. Miguel stepped closer, reading over my shoulder. "This says she's a co-owner now." Alara's tone sharpened slightly. "They needed help. You work long hours. They trust me. I streamlined everything." "You forged their trust," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "Don't be dramatic." I walked to the kitchen table and pulled out the documents from the drawer, the ones Rosa had signed. I flipped through the pages until I found the notarized copy. There it was, Rosa's signature, uneven, shaky, next to a typed line, "Gift transfer of appreciation, 35% total savings to Alara Solano." "Gift transfer?" I asked. "Rosa, did you give this to her?" My mother's face crumpled. "I never said that." Alara crossed her arms. "It's symbolic, a gesture. She's always said she was grateful." "You forged their gratitude," I said, barely above a whisper. She stared at me, unblinking. "You wouldn't understand. They need structure. You need peace. I'm trying to make things easier for all of us." Miguel sat down slowly, like his knees were failing him all over again. Rosa just walked out of the room, quietly closing the door to their bedroom. A soft click echoed louder than it should have. I stood in the middle of our kitchen, holding a paper that said my parents had given away part of their life savings, without knowing it, and I'd helped it happen by doing nothing. Later that night, I found Miguel still sitting in the same chair, staring at the turned-off television. "We raised you to trust," he said quietly, "not to doubt your own home." I didn't have anything to say back. I sat down across from him, placed the documents between us. He didn't touch them. The whole house felt heavier, and I realized silence isn't neutral, it's permission. I had given Alara permission, by staying quiet, by letting her run everything, by convincing myself she meant well. I stepped outside. The porch was cold. Still, the light was off. For a second, I just stood there. Then I reached up and flipped the switch. The bulb flickered once, then steadied. Warm light spread across the porch. If they couldn't see their way home anymore, maybe I had to be the one to light it. I stood in the doorway for a moment longer, breathing in the night air, then walked back inside. There was a new envelope on the counter, cream-colored, thick paper. No return address. On the front, in neat cursive, it said, "House Ownership Review." It wasn't Alara's handwriting. I held the envelope for a long time before opening it. The weight of it felt unreal, like it might vanish if I blinked too hard. The cream paper had been folded with care, not rushed. My mother's handwriting on the label was precise, like every letter mattered. And when I finally pulled out the contents, unfolded the page, and saw the first line, my chest tightened. If you're reading this, it means I couldn't say it out loud. I sat down at the edge of the couch, my thumb brushing along the crease in the paper. The living room was quiet. The kind of quiet where even the sound of breathing felt too loud. The wall clock ticked. Each tick landed like a soft warning. She had written it in Spanish first, then again in English beneath, for my sake. My mother always did that when things were important. "Adrian, we've been planning to leave. I didn't want to. But we no longer feel safe. We feel like guests in our own son's home." I heard Alara on the phone. She said, "They'll be gone soon. I just need the papers done. We are not waiting for her to decide when we disappear. We're leaving on our own terms." I lowered the letter for a moment, staring at the framed photos on the wall. Images of birthdays, Christmases, backyard barbecues. None of them recent. None with Alara and my parents in the same frame. My fingers trembled as I read the rest. "If you ever read this, I pray it's because you found it in time to stop her from doing worse. But if not, let it remind you that we loved you, even when we were afraid." I didn't realize I was crying until a drop landed on the page, smudging a word. I wiped my face quickly and refolded the letter, sliding it into my jacket pocket just as I heard Alara's voice. "Dinner in 20. Everyone's eating together tonight," she called from the kitchen. I looked toward the hallway. The door to my parents' room was closed. No sounds came from behind it. I rose, walked to the kitchen. Alara had set the table with more effort than usual. Cloth napkins, candles, wine glasses. She hummed softly, placing roasted chicken on a platter like we were hosting a celebration. But there were only 3 chairs. "Where's the other 2?" I asked. "They said they weren't hungry," she replied without looking up. I didn't believe her. I turned and walked straight to their room. The door was ajar. Inside, the bed was made. Too neat. The closet door was wide open, half empty. Their suitcases, the old brown ones they never used, were gone. Drawers pulled out, some left hanging. The small ceramic angel Rosa kept on her dresser was missing. "Alara," I called, louder than I intended. She appeared in the doorway, drying her hands. "What?" "They left," I said. "Did you know? I invited them to dinner. They declined. If they walked out, that's on them. You set the table like this was your performance. But the people you broke were already gone." She frowned, like my words were rude, not painful. "Adrian, don't be melodramatic. You've been on edge since they moved in." I stepped closer, gripping the back of a chair. "You forged their trust. You changed their finances. You erased them from our life and called it structure." "I saved this family," she snapped. "You never noticed who actually held it together." I slammed my palm on the table. The wine glasses clinked. The candles wavered. "Where are they?" I demanded. She didn't flinch. They left because you couldn't stand up for anything, not even yourself. Her calm was worse than yelling. I stepped back, unable to breathe in the same room. I grabbed my keys and bolted outside. The porch was dark again. The switch didn't respond. The bulb flickered once, then died completely. I stood under the black sky, heart pounding. The driveway was empty. Their car was still here. They walked, I whispered. I pulled out my phone, dialed my father, straight to voicemail, then my mother. The same. The silence on the line felt heavier than the night air. I sat on the porch steps, staring at the road. They were in their 70s. They had arthritis. They'd walked off into the night to escape a house that had become a prison. I reached into my jacket and pulled the letter out again. I had read it twice already, but something made me scan the bottom once more. And there it was, a line I hadn't noticed before, written in smaller letters, barely above the fold. Don't look for us until you know the truth about her. I froze. The door creaked behind me. Alara was standing in the doorway, framed by shadows, watching me. Her arms were crossed, no expression on her face, no fear, no shame, just quiet calculation. Our eyes locked. Neither of us spoke. I didn't need to ask who she was anymore. I just needed to find out how much I didn't know. That realization, that my mother had been preparing me, not just warning me, sat in my chest like a cold stone all night. I didn't sleep. Just paced the hallway, stared out windows, listened to the distant hum of passing cars. When morning finally crept through the blinds, it didn't feel like relief. It felt like exposure. The kitchen looked untouched, too untouched. 2 chairs were missing from the table, the ones my father always insisted stay in the same place, as if moving them would rearrange something deeper. Rose's teacup sat on the counter, the inside rim stained, the tea long gone cold. I reached for it without thinking, held it in both hands like it might still hold her warmth. It didn't. I walked through the house, slow, like moving too fast might wake up something I wasn't ready to face. Every surface had been wiped down, every item placed just right. It felt more like a model home than the place I'd grown up in, staged for people who would never return. I called my father's phone again, then my mother's. The ring echoed in the living room, bouncing off walls that already knew the answer. No one picked up. I grabbed my keys and drove around for hours. Past the grocery store where Miguel used to talk to the manager about avocados, past the park where Rosa liked to sit and feed the birds. I even stopped at the little church they sometimes visited on Tuesdays. The doors were locked. I called every relative I could think of, cousins in Laredo, my sister Elena in Denver. No one had heard from them. Every call ended the same. If I hear anything, I'll let you know. I left voicemail after voicemail. My voice got hoarser each time. Please call me. Please. Then just as I was about to give up, one call connected. It wasn't them. Sir, a man's voice said. This is the front desk at the Baylight Inn in Galveston. A room under the name Miguel Solano checked out this morning. They didn't leave a forwarding address. I froze, one hand gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles whitened. Did they say where they were headed? No, sir. Just asked for a receipt, left early, on foot. The line went dead. I sat there in the car, parked under a sycamore tree, heart racing. I slammed my palm against the wheel once, then again. Not because I was angry, because I couldn't feel anything else. They were really gone. When I got back home, the house felt even colder. Alara was sitting at the dining table sipping tea like nothing had changed. She looked up when I walked in, then reached into her purse and handed me a folded note. They left this for you, she said, her voice smooth. I opened it. The handwriting was shaky. It read, Don't worry about us. We're fine. It's better this way. But it wasn't my mother's handwriting, not even close. My breath caught. This isn't hers. Alara raised an eyebrow. Of course it is. I stared at the curves of the letters. The way the F curled, how the spacing was too even. Rosa's writing always sloped slightly, like she was writing while balancing a grocery bag. Why lie? I asked, my voice low but sharp. Alara set her cup down gently. Because you can't handle the truth about them. You always see what you want to see. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I stormed out of the kitchen, down the steps into the garage, ripping open storage boxes like a man searching for air. Behind a stack of old winter coats, I found it. The navy shawl Rosa wore every evening. I pressed it to my face, and her perfume hit me like a wave of childhood. Lavender, clean linen. She didn't take this, not because she forgot, because she didn't plan to leave. Not willingly. She made them, I whispered to the concrete floor. She made them go. Grief turned into a kind of silence I didn't recognize. Not the absence of sound, the absence of direction. Eventually, I went back upstairs and pulled Rosa's letter from my jacket again. The one I found behind the silverware tray. I read it twice. Then something strange caught my eye. The way the ink had slightly pressed through the paper, like there had been another sheet underneath when she wrote it. I grabbed a pencil from the counter and lightly shaded the back of the letter. At first, nothing. Then, faint grooves started to appear. Words written on another page, the pressure of them still imprinted on this one. Look in the lockbox. She used our names. My heart skipped. I dropped the pencil, rushed into my parents' old room. I yanked open the drawer beneath my father's bed. The small metal lockbox was still there, dusty, the latch slightly rusted. I forced it open. It was mostly empty. No documents, no jewelry, not even the old family birth certificates. Just one thing sat inside. A white plastic key card, the kind hotels or offices use. On the front, printed in small black letters, Bayou Tower Law, Suite 5C, Houston. I held it between my fingers like it might bite. She used their names. Whatever this was, and it wasn't just about money. And it wasn't over. I walked out into the hallway, still holding the key card, and past the mantel without meaning to. The photo frame caught my eye. The one Alara had trimmed weeks ago, the family photo. I lifted it from its stand, looked closer. The cut edge, the one where my parents had been, it matched the width of the note Alara gave me earlier. The forgery. She had used that piece to trace the curve of a goodbye she never earned. She's been rewriting us, I said under my breath. One page at a time. The photo, the note, the account changes. It was all a slow deletion, and I had let it happen. I clutched the key card tighter. I didn't know yet, but that card would open more than a drawer. It would open everything my mother was too afraid to say. I didn't waste time. Within the hour, I was headed downtown, the white plastic key card resting in the center console like it weighed 10 pounds. I drove with both hands on the wheel, elbows locked, my jaw clenched so tight I barely noticed the traffic or the shifting skyline. It wasn't courage that drove me there, it was guilt. Heavy, bitter guilt that I'd ignored too many signs and silences. The Bayou Tower was glass and steel, corporate and cold. The receptionist at the front desk looked up the moment I stepped in and gave me a small, sympathetic smile. "You must be Mrs. Solano's husband," she said gently, gesturing toward the elevator. "We've been expecting you." I nodded, even though my throat tightened at the word expecting. That meant my mother knew I'd eventually come. The ride to the 5th floor was silent except for the ding of passing floors and the sound of my own breathing. Suite 5C looked like every law office I'd ever seen in movies. Beige walls, clean carpet, certificates on the wall. A middle-aged man with thinning hair and a tired tie stood as I entered. "Mr. Solano," he said, offering his hand. "I'm Peter Grant. Your mother, she was very clear about wanting you to receive this." He walked to a locked drawer behind his desk and pulled out a slim manila folder marked Confidential, Solano Family Estate. I didn't sit, I just opened the folder right there. At first glance, it looked like standard estate paperwork, property designations, legal clauses, account statements. Then I saw it. An addendum to my parents' will, dated just a month ago. It outlined a revised ownership structure of our house, granting Alara partial ownership rights, effective immediately. The signatures at the bottom made my stomach flip. The same shaky handwriting, the same forced loops, the same uneven pressure. I'd seen it before, on the goodbye note Alara had forged. I looked up at Mr. Grant. "This isn't real." He hesitated, then leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Your mother suspected something like this might happen. She left something else for you." He reached into a separate drawer and handed me a small flash drive. On the side, written in delicate marker, "For Adrian." I took it with trembling fingers. "There's an audio file on there," he said quietly. She gave it to me 2 weeks ago. Asked me to hold it until you came. I didn't wait. I plugged it into my phone, slipped on a pair of earbuds Mr. Grant handed me, and pressed play. The recording was scratchy at first. I heard Rose's voice, soft and hesitant. Then Ilara's, calm, composed, like she was discussing groceries, not betrayal. "You'll feel safer this way," Ilara said in the recording. "Once the papers are signed, there's no more confusion, no risk of external interference." Rose's voice shook. "You mean our son?" A pause. Then Ilara's chilling reply. "No, I mean outsiders. This house, it needs order, and that only happens if it's under my control." Another pause, then Rosa, barely a whisper. "We are the outsiders, aren't we?" I pulled the earbuds out like they were burning. My hands were sweating. Mr. Grant didn't say a word. He just waited. I thanked him stiffly, then walked out of the office and down the stairs. Couldn't face the elevator again. My legs felt heavy, my thoughts heavier. I sat outside on the steps, the sounds of Houston bustling around me. I looked up at the sky, cloudless, too blue for the day I was having. I used to think love was what you protected, I thought. I never realized it's also what you can destroy by pretending to protect. Everything, the fake will, the forged note, the audio, all of it pointed to one truth. This wasn't just manipulation. It was war waged in whispers and paperwork, and I'd let it happen. I got in my car and stared at the dash. Then, slowly, I called Ilara. She picked up on the second ring. "I know everything now," I said. Her voice was calm. "Then you know why it had to be done." I stared at my own reflection in the rearview mirror, the bags under my eyes, the line forming between my brows, the man I barely recognized anymore. "No," I replied, steady and low. "I know why it ends tonight." I ended the call. Dusk was settling as I drove. The sky bled orange and purple over the city, and streetlights blinked on in uneven rhythm. My mind locked on one thing, the porch light, the one that had gone dark the night my parents left, the one I hadn't turned back on. "She turned off their light," I murmured. "Now I'll turn on the truth." I didn't need rage to fuel me now. I had resolve, cold, quiet resolve. When I pulled into the driveway, something was off. The front door was ajar. I stepped out, every muscle in my body tense. No sounds, no movement, just the hum of a neighbor's air conditioner in the distance. I stepped inside. The house was dark, too dark, but in the kitchen, one light glowed, a small lamp over the table. Its warm yellow cast made the shadows deeper. On the table sat the family photo Ilara had cropped weeks ago, only now one corner of it was burned. The edges curling, the paper blackened. It wasn't accidental, it was a message. And then I heard it, from the hallway. Soft, low, and haunting. A hum. The same tune my mother used to sing when she folded laundry. But it wasn't my mother. I wasn't alone in the house. The humming wasn't just familiar, so it was haunting. I stood there in the entryway, frozen, heart pounding against my ribs like it wanted out. That song, Blue Moon. My mother used to hum it every Sunday while making arroz con leche. She sang it when she was happy, or when she wanted the kitchen to feel like home. Now it slithered through the hallway, slower, off-key. It didn't feel like a memory. It felt like theft. I stepped forward, past the photo still smoking slightly on the edge of the table. The kitchen light flickered overhead, casting shadows across the tile. And there she was. Ilara stood by the sink, back to me, washing a single plate. She was humming softly, swaying just enough to make the whole thing feel like a show. Her sleeves were rolled up, hair pulled back like nothing had happened. The flash drive in my pocket felt like a weapon. I pulled it out and set it gently on the counter. "You recorded her, didn't you?" She didn't flinch. She kept washing, the water running slow. Then she turned slightly, giving me a faint smile, that kind of smile people wear at funerals when they think they're the only one who understands loss. "She was planning to take you away from me," she said. My jaw tightened. "You forged their will. You forged their goodbye. And you call that love?" She didn't blink. "I call that sacrifice," she replied. And then, in one swift motion, she grabbed the flash drive and tossed it straight into the sink. Water splashed. The metal clinked against the basin. You don't understand what they were doing, she snapped. They never accepted me. Not really. Every time I tried, your mother made sure I knew I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't her. I slammed my palm down on the table. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. No, I said. You made sure they didn't feel like they belonged. Her face contorted, not in guilt, but rage. She walked over to a drawer, yanked it open, and held up Rose's shawl. Except it wasn't folded or fragrant. It was torn, jagged, like it had been ripped apart. She wore this every time she wanted to remind you who she was. Like a crown, Alara hissed. She made you hers again and again. I stepped forward slowly. They were my parents, I said. You turned them into ghosts while they were still alive. We stood there, barely breathing. Her fingers clenched the shawl like a trophy, eyes wild, mouth tight. I didn't know if she was going to throw it at me or burn it. Then I saw something blinking, barely noticeable. A small red light tucked behind the top shelf near the coffee mugs. A camera. I moved past her, ignoring her sudden shout behind me. I climbed the step stool and unplugged the tiny device. The blinking stopped. Below it was a hidden router labeled Home Security, ES. You've been recording us? I asked. She didn't answer. I turned to face her. You've been recording our family's moments like props, like scenes. You don't know what you're saying. No, I know exactly what I'm saying. I held up the router. You weren't trying to protect anything. You were staging us. You made a theater out of my life. Her face twisted. She lunged forward and tried to grab the router from my hands. You'll destroy everything I built. I held her off with one arm. My voice was calm, maybe too calm. No, I said. You already did. That stopped her. The silence afterward was heavier than any scream. Her arms dropped to her sides. She stood there motionless. I didn't say another word. I turned and walked out of the kitchen. I passed the living room, the hallway, the scorched photo. The house felt gutted, not by fire, but by memory. Outside, the sky had darkened fully. The porch bulb still hung from the socket, dead and dusty. I climbed onto the step stool and unscrewed the old bulb. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the new one I'd bought earlier that day, without even knowing why. The glass was cold in my hand. I twisted it into place, and when I flipped the switch, a warm, golden glow spilled across the steps. It was the first time the light had been on since Rosa left. I stood there, hands in my pockets, breath forming small clouds in the night air. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel whole. But I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Clarity. Then my phone rang. The screen said, unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something in me, maybe instinct, maybe hope, made me answer. Hello? There was a brief pause. Then, in the softest voice I've ever heard, my mother whispered, Don't come looking for us yet. It's not safe. I froze, not just because she was alive, but because I heard something else. A click, the sound of a second line being picked up. Someone else was listening. The line went dead, but the echo of her voice, my mother's voice, lingered in my ears like a ghost refusing to leave. She was alive, and not alone. I stood there in the driveway, frozen beneath the porch light that now glowed steady and warm. A second ago, I thought I'd taken back control. But with that one whispered warning, everything flipped again. I ran inside, grabbed my keys from the table, and bolted for the car. The engine stuttered to life as I backed out of the driveway, headlights slicing through the darkness. Come on, I muttered, fumbling to redial the number. No answer, just silence. But she'd said one word before the line dropped, one word I clung to like a lifeline. Motel, no name, no location, just motel. I didn't care. I drove. Highway 59 stretched out in front of me like a black ribbon winding through nowhere. I kept checking my phone, hoping maybe she'd call again. Nothing. I drove with one hand on the wheel, the other gripping the dash like it might anchor me to something solid. The night was quiet except for the hum of tires and my own thoughts. I kept thinking about that photo, the way it had been burned, the part she cut out. I thought about the fake note, the fake will, the fake smiles, and I thought about the voice on the other end of the phone. I used to believe love meant shielding people from pain, covering for them, pretending for them. But maybe real love, the kind that matters, is what's left after the pretending ends. When you see the cracks and choose to stay, that's what my parents did. They stayed. Until she made them leave. I pulled into the third motel I passed. A dimly lit place just off a service road. It looked like the kind of place people go to disappear. I walked into the lobby, still catching my breath. The woman at the front desk blinked slowly when I asked, "Solano, Rosa, or Miguel?" She hesitated. Then her eyes softened. "They left about an hour ago," she said. "But your mother, she asked me to give you this if you showed up." She handed me a small padded envelope, no name on the outside, just a USB drive inside. Back in the car, I plugged it into the dashboard port and turned the volume up. It took a few seconds before I heard her voice. "Adrian." Her voice was steady but tired. It was the sound of someone who had carried too much for too long. "If you're hearing this, it means we're gone. But not because we wanted to leave you. We left for you. Elara said she'd destroy you, that she'd make it look like you stole from us, that you trapped us. She said she had everything she needed to ruin you." I gripped the wheel. She wasn't bluffing, mijo. We saw the copies, the accounts, the forged forms. She made it look like you emptied our retirement, that you coerced us into signing everything over. There was a pause. Then she added, "We couldn't let her do that to you. Not after everything you've done for us, not after how hard you worked to keep this family together. So we ran, to give you time, to protect your name, to protect your future." My throat tightened. I closed my eyes. "They didn't run from me. They ran for me." She continued, her voice more fragile now. "I don't know what will happen next, but I do know this. No matter what she said, no matter what she showed you, we never stopped loving you. We never doubted who you are." That was the end of the message. I didn't move for a long time. Then slowly, I put the car in gear and started driving back home. This time, I wasn't running toward answers. I had them. I was going back to finish what my mother started. Back home, the house was still. I walked in, plugged the drive into my laptop, and forwarded the audio file to Mr. Grant. Then I sent it to the police. Last, I texted Elara. "I'm done being silent." It took her 5 minutes to respond. "You'll regret this." I stared at the screen. Not this time. By the time the sun peeked over the horizon, I was outside again. The morning air was crisp, quiet. I walked to the porch and flipped the switch again. The light stayed on. "For you, Mom. For Dad," I whispered. "I'll keep the light on." A few hours later, squad cars rolled in. Officers knocked, took statements, gathered devices. Elara was gone, vanished without a sound. I didn't ask where she went. I didn't need to. I stood in the yard watching the sun rise through the trees. "There's no revenge strong enough to fix a family," I said under my breath. "Only the truth left behind." And then it was just me again. The officers drove off. The yard grew quiet. I stepped inside, locking the door behind me. Then my phone buzzed. One new voicemail. Unknown number. I hit play. It was my father's voice. Shaky, strained. "Son, if you're listening," a pause. She wasn't working alone. The words hit harder than anything else. It wasn't over. Not yet. I stood in the kitchen long after the voicemail ended, holding the phone like it might ring again, like maybe I'd misheard. But my father had said it, clear as day, even if his voice was cracked and barely above a whisper. She wasn't working alone. It was like a second betrayal layered over the first. I didn't sleep much that night. Maybe an hour. I woke on the living room couch before the sun rose, still dressed, blanket half pulled over me, the porch light glowing faintly through the window. The house was quiet, still, but not the same kind of silence as before. This silence wasn't haunted. It was hollow, emptied. The cops were gone. Elara was gone. The echoes were still here. I sat up, my back aching. The coffee table hadn't moved. The photo was still there, one corner singed, edges curled from the heat. But my parents' faces, still intact. Rosa smiling gently, Miguel with that same unreadable calm he always carried. All the parts Elara tried to erase had survived. Sometimes, I murmured, what survives the fire is what we should have cherished all along. I stared at that photo until my eyes blurred. Then slowly, I opened the voicemail again. My father's voice playing through tinny speakers, soft and tired. She wasn't working alone. And something clicked. I turned the photo slightly, noticed the torn edge on the right, the part that used to hold someone else. Daniel, my older brother, the golden child, the one who always showed up late to family dinners and left early, who always had something better to do, somewhere more important to be. The one who, after Rosa and Miguel moved in with us, suddenly stopped calling. It hadn't made sense before. Now it did. He wanted them gone, too. I sat with that thought a long time. It didn't come with rage, just a heavy kind of sadness. Even blood can rot quietly. I left a note on the counter, locked the door, and got in the car. The sky was overcast, gray light filtering through like it didn't want to commit to being morning. I drove west, past old roads and familiar exits, past the places I used to go with my parents when I was a kid, until I reached the lakeside cemetery. Rosa once told me, almost in passing, that if she ever had ashes, she wanted them scattered there. Quiet, simple, she'd said. Not too fancy. I just want to be somewhere that doesn't expect too much of me. As I pulled into the gravel lot, I saw them. My parents. Sitting side by side on a wooden bench. Miguel's hand rested on Rosa's knee. She looked thinner, smaller somehow, but they were real. Alive. I walked up without a word. Rosa stood, wrapped her arms around me. I didn't speak either. Not right away. We just stood there, letting the air between us say what words couldn't. Finally, Rosa pulled back, tears in her eyes. Yet we knew she'd come for us, she said. We just didn't think Daniel would help her. Miguel nodded, his voice gravelly. You can't fix them, son. You can only not become them. We sat for a while. The lake moved quietly behind us, lapping at the shore. I told them everything. About the recording, the will, the fake letters, the police. Rosa held her breath through it all, then said softly, You did what we couldn't. You faced her. I didn't win, Mom, I replied. I just stopped pretending. She reached for my hand. That's winning enough. Her skin felt fragile, but her grip was steady. She looked into my eyes and said, Keep your light on, Adrian, even when no one else does. We didn't stay long. No big goodbye this time. Just a quiet agreement that this wasn't over, but we had done enough for today. Back home, the sun had already shifted overhead. The light inside the house felt softer now, not warmer, just honest. I started clearing out what was left of Alara's things. Quietly, no dramatics. I found her jewelry box last. At the bottom, wrapped in a silk scarf, was a folded note. Rose's handwriting. It read, When you find this, don't let anger guide you. Let truth do what anger never can. I sat down on the bed, holding it like it might disappear. That was the echo of midnight. Not rage, not revenge, just clarity. That night, I made a cup of tea, stepped out onto the porch, and sat down. The light behind me buzzed, then clicked on. A soft, warm glow. They say family is forever, I murmured. Maybe that's true, but forever doesn't always mean together. I watched the trees sway gently. Sometimes forever is the courage to keep the light on, even when you're the last one left. The bulb flickered once, then held steady, and somewhere barely audible in the wind, I thought I heard it. Rose's voice, humming Blue Moon, not haunting, not grieving, just echoing. Fading, soft, real.